This is St. Anthony of Padua Rad Trad. I wanted to just share my thoughts on the issue of the Una Cum and why I personally don't have an issue attending an SSPX chapel. SSPX resistance, and whatnot. Especially if I don't have if there's a Sedevacantist chapel, that's where I go to a Sedevacantist chapel. But if I'm out of town or whatever, I'll go to SSPX. I'll go to resistance. I don't have an issue, but I just wanted to give my thoughts. I wanted to share my position. Where to begin on this issue? If someone was to pose to me, hey, St. Anthony Padua Rad Trad, why did you go to the SSPX Mass? Why do you go to an SSPX Mass? Why do you go there? I would say, well, because I believe to be Catholic. That's why I go. It's a Catholic Mass. Okay? And they say, okay, you believe it to be a Catholic Mass. Yes, I believe it to be a Catholic Mass. That's why I go to the SSPX. Well, why don't you go to the FSSP? Do you believe it to be a Catholic Mass? Well, no. And that's because they hold to heresy and they're invalid priests. So I don't go to the FSSP. I doubt their priesthood to be valid. Okay, so I'm not talking about conciliar traditionalists or the Novus Ordo or nothing. I oppose those. I don't go to those. But when it comes to Una Cum like SSPX, all right, I don't have a problem. If I was to, let's say, ask somebody who's opposed to the Una Cum Mass, who thinks that you should never go to the Una Cum Mass because Leo's name's mentioned in the canon of the Mass, and he's a modernist and not a Catholic, and therefore not a pope. And if you mention his name in the Mass, it makes it no longer Catholic Mass. Okay. So I asked them, well, is it Catholic? Let me ask you, is the SSPX a Catholic Mass? And if they tell me that, yes, I believe the SSPX is Catholic. Let's say, is the SSPX Catholic? And they say, well, yeah, yes, I believe they're Catholic. Then my question is, then you should go there. If you believe it, if you say, yes, the SSPX is Catholic, but I disagree with them on these things, and they do things that are not right, well, is it Catholic or not? Yes, it's Catholic. Well, then you need to be at the SSPX Mass. Then, if that's what's nearby you, then you need to go there and put your differences aside and attend the Mass. Right? As long as the priest is valid, then you should be there. And that's where I'm at. I believe the Mass is valid. I believe the priest is valid. I believe the Mass is Catholic. So I'll go to it. All right. So if that's what you believe, then you should go there. And it doesn't matter about your hang-ups and whatnot. Are they Catholic? Yes, they're Catholic. Well, then who cares? Then you go to the Mass there and deal with and work out your own hang-ups. But you go there and participate in the Mass. All right. Now, if they told me, if they say, no, I don't believe they're Catholic, that's why I don't go as a Sedevacantist, because they're not Catholic. And I say, well, okay, when did they stop being Catholic? Or were they never Catholic? When did they stop being Catholic? Maybe, I don't know, but then they might say, well, maybe they were never Catholic, but, they were not ever Catholic. And I'm saying, why would you say they're never Catholic? Well, because they always say, because they've always used the false pope's name in the canon. All right, okay. So, if you're going to tell me that the SSPX is not Catholic, has never been Catholic, and it's because they used the false pope's name in the canon of the Mass. Now, what about the Masses during the reign of John the 23rd? Who almost every Sedevacantist I've ever met and listened to online and whatnot believes John the 23rd to be an anti-pope, false pope. But yet there were no Sedevacantists during his reign. Every person who claimed or purported to be Catholic was in union with him, was part of the hierarchy, part of that chain of hierarchy, from priest to bishop, whatever, all used John the 23rd's name in the canon. Are we saying that there was no Catholic Mass during the reign of John the 23rd? If you're opposed to attending Una Cum Mass with with Leo XIV's name in it, because he's the anti-pope and whatnot, do you hold the same thing during the time of John the 23rd? In the reign of John the 23rd, there was no Sedevacantists. Every Catholic church offered the Mass in union with John the 23rd, an antipope. So were there no Catholic Masses at that time? That's an absurd position for me to accept. It's absurd for me to say, yeah, well, yes, there were. I guess there were no Catholic Masses at the time of John 23rd. No, that's crazy. Okay, because then when Paul VI was elected, guess what? There were still no Sedevacantists when he was elected. And eventually, Sedevacantists began to spring up after Vatican II and the implementation of the new religion, of the new Mass, and imposing the false religion upon the people. People began to say, hey, something's not right here. They're imposing this false modernist religion on us. Maybe this man can't be a Catholic. And then they began to debate this issue about what do we make of what's happening here. All right. But guess what? All right. People were offering the Mass in the name of John 23rd, the name of Paul VI. Okay. And so there had to, it's not realistic to think that there was just no Catholic Mass anymore at all during that time. Now, well, keep in mind, the SSPX was formed within this structure. All right, within this structure of Paul VI. All right, it was formed, approved, right? Approved. And they always said the name of the supposed reigning pontiff in their Mass. That's never changed. They've always done this. All right. So this is what they do. They've always offered the Mass in union, or you could say using the name of whoever the supposed reigning pontiff is. So if you're going to tell me that if you're going to say, well, no, they're not Catholic, and they haven't been Catholic, or they're not Catholic, whatever, then what you're telling me is that the priests who are ordained by Archbishop Lefebvre and his 4 bishops are not Catholic priests. Okay, they're not Catholic, because guess what? They were never part of the Catholic Church. They're not Catholic. They're outside of it. So the priests and the bishops, the Sedevacantist bishops, some of the Sedevacantist bishops have their origin, have their vocational call from within this structure of the SSPX. Right? They received their ordination, they received their calling from the SSPX, whom you are going to say are outside the church, are not part of the church, are not the church. And if that means that these prelates, like Bishop Sanborn, Bishop Dolan, other Sedevacantist priests are usurpers. They stole their ordination. They stole their rights unlawfully, because nobody gets their calling, their vocation, from outside the church. That comes from the church. It comes from within the church. They get sent out by the church. And so if they didn't get sent out if you see the SSPX is outside the church as not Catholic, then you're telling me that these men, these bishops who I respect, who I consider to be Catholic bishops, okay, are not Catholic bishops, but instead are thieves who entered in through another way, another door, entered in through the side window of a house, or something. They broke in. They didn't go through the front door. They didn't go through the proper way. They broke in and stole what rightfully belonged to someone else. They stole what belonged to the Catholic Church, and it took it upon themselves to become priests and bishops and to minister sacraments. If you're going to tell me that the SSPX is not Catholic and outside the church, then you're telling me that they're outside the church. That's what you're telling me. And that to me makes no sense. Okay, but to me, that's the logical position you have to conclude. You have to conclude that they're outside the church because they received their sacraments from an entity, a group, a sect, whatnot, that didn't have any authority from the church because they were never part of the church. Because, as you say, they use Paul VI and whoever the anti-pope is named in the Mass. So that means they are not Catholic. But I said, I don't accept such a position. I reject such a position. To me, they are Catholic. To me, the SSPX is Catholic. To me, all these people are Catholic. So that's one of the things that one of the reasons I can say, well, I don't have a problem going to the SSPX. Another thing that helped me to confirm my stance and having no issue going to an SSPX chapel, even though they are una cum, whoever the reigning antipope is because of actually the thesis position. Believe it or not, the thesis position helped solidify my position, my view on this. Or at least helped articulate my view on this, I guess. Because, now, I don't hold the thesis. I think I would say I lean toward it or whatever. But they have, as I've heard it, as I understand it, being articulated, that the Novus Ordo is the visible structure of the church. The Novus Ordo is the visible structure of the church, and their hierarchy is a visible hierarchy. And that if they convert, although they don't have the jurisdiction, they haven't been given the jurisdiction yet or whatever because there's an impediment. They're the proper structure and visible hierarchy. And if they were to convert, they would assume that proper role. So I don't see it the same as if, let's say, there's a valid priest offering the Mass in union with like Pope Michael or whoever, or some random, like, I believe my brother's the Pope, so I'm going to offer the Mass in union with my brother. No, I would not go to that Mass. Okay? If there happened to be supposedly a traditional priest and he says, oh, I believe Pope so-and-so is the Pope. And so we offer our Mass in union with his person. I'd be like, I'm out of here. I am not going to your Mass. And you just created a new church. Like, I don't know who you are, but you're in union with some... I have nothing to do with you. So I would not attend that Mass. But I don't see it the same as the SSPX offering their Mass in union with Pope Leo, who, even though I believe not to be a valid Pope, because the Novus Ordo, whatever, the popes, whatever, have never actually ever been pronounced or judged by the church itself. Okay, so just like when Novus Ordos come into the traditional chapels, they come to the traditional church and whatever, they're not given some abjuration of error. They're not made to, you know what I'm saying? They're just welcomed in and embraced in. Because there's been no judicial sanction against these men. We just know because we hear what they're saying, we know what they're trying to impose, but there's been no judicial sanction against these people. So they're still the visible structure. It's still the visible structure, and I can understand the confusion. And like people say, look, like maybe a SSPX resistance person will say, look, I believe Francis to be a Francis to be a heretic, or Leo to be a heretic. I believe they're heretics, and that they're not Catholic. And I actually don't think they're true popes, even. But because the church has never made the judgment, I don't feel like I have the authority to not use the name of the person who happens to be sitting in Peter's chair at the moment, whether or not he's a valid or not. That's beyond my scope. So I'm just going to offer the Mass as a Catholic. I believe, he's the visible head, and until he's been determined not to be, I'm going to go with that. All right, I'm not going to fault the man for that. Okay, I'm not going to fault him. I'll be okay. All right. I mean, I get it. I think he's not the Pope, and I think you can argue logically and consistently by the faith that the man isn't. But I understand that point, and that's because the thesis position allows that you have this visible structure of the Novus Ordo, although they don't have the authority because they're imposing a false religion. So that structure and authority is there. It's possible if they are to convert. So because I see that the Novus Ordo is that visible structure, I don't see someone who's offering the Mass in union with who I believe personally to be an anti-pope or a false pope or not a true pope, to be offering a Mass outside the church, because the church herself has never declared these popes to be as such. So, but yet I believe them as such. It's just waiting the legal declaration. I think they are, and I think God has made that judgment based upon what they're doing. But that's why I don't have the issue. That's why I can say, look, I can go to the SSPX church. I'll go to the SSPX chapel because, it's Catholic. It's a Catholic Mass. Yes, they're offering the Mass in union with whom I believe to be an anti-pope. All right, I believe that. But they're offering the Mass in union with that visible structure, that proper structure, as opposed to like some rando out there. And that visible structure is still there. The election, the election succession and so forth is still there. These people just haven't been casted out yet. They haven't been kicked out. So in the meantime, they're still there. They're still, so I can understand the confusion. And that's why I don't have a particular issue. And that's why I don't see it to be a mortal sin to go to the SSPX and so forth if they're nearby and whatnot. Anyway, so these are just my thoughts on why I have no problem going to an Unicum Mass. I have no problem going to SSPX Chapel or SSPX Resistance or whatnot. One, because I don't see them. I mean, they reject the errors of Vatican II. They reject the issues going on. We just have this disagreement among what to do about the hierarchy that is imposing it. All right, that's why I don't see them the same as the FSSP and the Institute of Christ the King and whatnot. Yeah, I know there's going to be disagreements on that, and that's fine. It is what it is. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on it, why I don't have an issue. Ave Maria.